So good afternoon to our viewers here in Germany, and good morning to our viewers in the United States at this beautiful spring day with the sun still shining on this side of the Atlantic and coming up on the other side. I'm Stormy Annika Mildner. I'm the director of the Aspen Institute in Germany, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our already 14th edition of our virtual series State to State, German-American State Legislator Dialogue, which brings together state legislators from Germany and the United States in order to talk about some of the most pressing issues at the state and local levels. And Steve, I can't almost believe that it's the 14th edition already.
It is hard to believe.
It is hard to believe, but it is as timely as when we started this series. We are delighted to do this collaboration between Aspen Germany and ACG, as we both agree that a focus on the subnational level and exchanges and in-depth discussions among German and North American state legislators with a broader audience, with you, is more important than ever. We decided quite a while ago, some years ago, that fostering relations between Berlin and Washington, or Brussels and Washington, is certainly not enough. And we have seen it over and over, that especially when times get tough between our capitals, we need the sub-federal level. And not only this, it's also really important to look at the sub-federal level because a lot of legislation is done there. The states are the laboratories for democracy. They can be that in a good way, but sometimes maybe also not such a good way. There might be best cases and there might be not so good cases. And we want to learn from each other. We want to allow the learning between our two countries. And we certainly also want the learning between the states, also within our respective countries. States matters, community matters, cities matters. And this is why we are doing this dialogue and also are continuing this dialogue. And today we are going to deal with a topic which couldn't be more topical, so to say, but I guess I could have said that for the last couple of years. But artificial intelligence and technology shapes our everyday life. It helps us in our work. I'm pretty sure you used it already today, either in your search functions or when you were on social media, or maybe also when you were putting together a little text or a headline, or when you were trying to formulate something in a better way, or maybe even when you were making decisions what to do next and how to structure your day. Maybe AI also helped you to put your calendar together for today, to decide who you are meeting. AI helps us to communicate with each other. AI can help us tremendously to make processes more efficient and faster. AI can help us to, in a bigger sense, to detect threats, physical threats, digital threats. It can help us to make our infrastructure more efficient. It can also advance sustainability. There are so many good cases for AI, but on the other hand, there are also lots of challenges and lots of risks. AI can have built-in biases, for example. It can lead us to decisions which are not optimal. It can advance disinformation or information manipulation. AI also doesn't lead automatically to better democratic systems. It can also undermine democracy when it falls into the wrong hands or is used by wrong hands. It can also, or it does also, increase the threat of cyber attacks. So it has good sides, but it has also challenges. And that means that we need a really good regulatory framework for this, both on the federal level, on the sub-federal level, and really also on the international level. AI should be human-centric, but what does that really mean? How do we regulate AI? And this is what we want to discuss with you today. And I hope we go out of this meeting with lots of new ideas. I could not think of anybody else than my partner in crime, Steve, to lead us better through this discussion. And with this, I'm handing it over into the trusted hands of Steve. Thank you so much.
Well, Stormy, herzlichen Dank. Thank you so much. Thanks for setting the stage and for getting us off to a good start. I can only underscore exactly what you said about the importance of focusing on the subnational level, particularly at this time, given what's going on in politics in both of our countries at the national level. What happens at the state and local level continues to be of incredible importance. And so it really is a delight to be doing this series of events together with Aspen, Germany. And I also can't underscore enough how important we both have found individually, but through our institutions, that the exchange of best practices is really important as we try to navigate challenges, but also opportunities on both sides of the Atlantic. And in the area of artificial intelligence and tech, this is a zukunftsträchtige, right, a forward-looking topic or field, and one where there are a lot of open questions, but also one that we need to navigate together. And so I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by 4 state legislators. You can only see 3 of them at the moment, but we're assured that the 4th is on her way. 2 are from Germany and 2 are from the United States. Their bios will be posted in the chat, and so you can read more about each of them. But let me suffice it to say that each of our guests today brings expertise on the topic and a unique perspective. On the German side, let me welcome Nina Eisenhardt. She's a member of the Bündnis 90 The Grüne, or Alliance 90 The Greens. She serves in the state parliament in Hessen. And among other things, she's a member of the Committee for Digital Affairs and Data Protection. Nina, herzlich willkommen. Also from Germany is Franziska Müller-Rech. She's a Free Democrat in the state of North Rhine-Westphalia and serves in the parliament there. She's the chairwoman of a new commission on artificial intelligence. And she just had a group of visitors from the US, from the state of Pennsylvania, for an exchange that we did that focused on education and is working to bring together the 2 states. Franziska, it's great to see you. Herzlich willkommen. And on the US side, we're very happy to welcome Senator Lashrecse Aird. She's a Democrat in the Virginia State Senate. And in that role, she also serves on the Artificial Intelligence Subcommittee and the Joint Commission on Technology and Science. Lashrecse, welcome. And last but not least, we're joined by Representative Valerie Gaydos. She's a Republican who serves in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. And she also participated in the study tour that we just organized that my colleague Rob Festermacher put together. And she traveled with the PSBA, the Pennsylvania School Boards Association, to the state of NRW. And that's where Franziska and Valerie had a chance to meet each other. Thank you so much for being with us today. So before we get started, I have one housekeeping issue, and that is we, of course, always want this to be interactive, and I've told our speakers that they should interact directly with each other, but we also want to interact with all of you. So if you have questions for our distinguished panel, please feel free to pose them in the Q&A function and let me know who the question is directed to. You can also raise your virtual hand, and when the time comes, we can bring you into the conversation. So please keep in mind also that the event is going to be recorded and will be uploaded to our social media channels after the event. So let's get started, right? Let's dive in. And I thought that maybe the easiest way to do that is for each of you to sort of introduce yourself very briefly, but through the lens of artificial intelligence and technology. And I would love it if you could each describe the challenges, but also the opportunities that you see in your home state when it comes to AI. Lashrecse, why don't we start with you and what's going on in Virginia at the moment?
Thank you so much again for organizing today's discussion. It's an honor to participate in. It's such an exciting topic. As stated, I'm Lashrecse Aird, and this is my second year in the state Senate. I've probably been working on artificial intelligence, specifically legislation, since about 2019, previously during my time in the House of Delegates, our state body. And I found myself working on this issue because my primary policy focus had been on issues of disparity, issues of bias, and trying to ensure we're rooting those types of issues out of our traditional institutions. But what I found is that while they may be transitioning out of our brick and mortar institutions, we are finding them being built and baked into digital systems and structures. And so in Virginia, I found that to be a real challenge. There was not one regulating entity to do an assessment of how this transition was occurring and how our public bodies at the state, local, and national, state and local level, public bodies were interacting with this technology. So it's very exciting to see our school divisions and law enforcement and courts and every entity you could think of adopting tools for efficiencies, but concerning that we had not adopted sort of a public agreement on the trade-offs we would be okay with for utilizing those tools. And so to sort of wrap up this introduction, the conversation in Virginia began with assessment and putting a baseline in place. And the challenge that I see now is probably one that you're seeing across the country. Industry does not want a patchwork of regulations at the state level, the subnational level. They want to see comprehensive policy that they consistently have to adhere to, but we are in such gridlock at the national level that it's very difficult to imagine that we will have that comprehensive policy. And instead, the states do have to respond in trying to ensure that Virginia is one of those states that does so in a responsible way. It's just going to be critical.
So Lashrecse, thank you for that. And I definitely want to come back to this notion of a comprehensive policy nationally at some point in our conversation. But before we bring Valerie into the conversation, I want to ask you about that catalyst that got you interested in this. You said that you started working on AI issues in 2019 because of a focus on disparity and bias and sort of noticing that there were disparities. Is that a gap that you feel has closed in the last 5 or 6 years, or is that still as much of an issue today as it was when you started working on this topic?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for that follow-up question. That continues to be a growing gap, in my opinion, both with systems that are being developed as well as the assessment of the systems themselves and the ability to do so. When you talk about big data and small data and what is being used to actually feed many of these systems, you will hear many developers talk about how difficult it is to utilize small data, which oftentimes can aid in eliminating some of the bias that exists in coding, algorithmic bias, if you will. And I am seeing that even based on the legislation we attempted to pass just this past session, that there is growing reason to be concerned about that gap worsening.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Valerie, you serve in Pennsylvania, and of course, in your role, you're also on the House Communications and Technology Committee. And I'd be interested in getting your sort of initial assessment as well on how you started to work on this topic, but also maybe even pick up on some of the points that Lashrecse made about what's going on in Virginia and the degree to which you're observing similar or different things in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Well, Senator Aird mentioned, the biases that are in this stuff. What's fascinating is that we forget that AI is just so big. People think of it as Chat GPT, and it is just all this information dumped in. There's a balance where you want to find some biases in terms of cultivating information so that it's not just putting garbage in. That's the key and the challenge that we all have. But the other big challenge that we've found is educating people, what is AI? You know, it's machine learning, it's language learning, it's also, you know, stuff that we do, like I said, ChatGPT. You know, there's all sorts of the neural networks. There's it's a lot more complex than people think, and it's actually not something new. You know, you look back at when IBM did the chess match. That was more than what 30, 40 years ago. That was the beginning of artificial intelligence, you know, beating a chess master at playing chess. So this is not something new. It's just that it's proliferating very fast. So for me, how I got involved in a lot of this is that prior to being elected, I spent 25 years in the tech sector, mostly being an investor in startup companies, mostly tech companies, and was fascinating. I had a lot of early tours working with NSA, the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab, all that technology that these people were trying to figure this out. Well, you know, some of those language learning software was very, very early. And what's amazing now is that we've gotten to a point where this technology is now teaching itself. And that's where I think where we are at this stage, that's so when you look at like how we're addressing it, there's all these different silos and everyone's lumping it into one. So there's the fear of AI, which is, you know, you think of the Sorcerer's Apprentice, right? You know, all the brooms start going off and doing everything beyond the control. That's a real fear in some things, particularly when there are biases put into the data in the first place. So we have to be very, very careful of what we're generating AI with. Because just remember, it's all the stuff we're putting in. So it's not like this magic box. In many ways, it can accelerate all of our worst mistakes, as well as accelerate some other things. So when you look at, and I don't mean to be capitalizing the time on this because I do want to leave room for questions, but I serve on the Committee on Communications and Technology, but also was appointed as the chair of the AI Opportunity Task Force in the Republican House, and also so it's hard to say, the Joint State Government Commission on, they do studies on and this one's on AI, and I am the House member along with my colleague Representative Mirsky are the House members on that. And what we're looking at is government sector of how government's using AI. Our governor has a section that's taking a look at how the universities are using AI. But if you look at our departments, you're looking at, like, let's say if you look at the Department of Transportation, that's a perfect example of how they're already using AI, license plate readers. They're using AI in planning and development, a lot of predictive technologies, which roads are going to go bad, what's asphalt, you know, where's traffic going to go. So we're already using that. So I'll let anyone ask questions. I don't want to capitalize the time on here, but it's complex is really my point. And
yeah, Valerie, I think that's great. And I'm sure that when we hear from Nina and Franziska, we'll hear some interesting parallels with the situation in Germany. But before we do that, I mean, obviously we've come a long way since the IBM chess match that you talked about, right? The advances have been pretty significant. And throughout this time, and you touched on this, we have to think about the educational component, right? It has, at the end of the day, a lot to do with AI literacy, if you will, and making sure that people know the pros and cons of using these tools, especially since you're just off of a trip that focused on education. To what degree did issues around literacy when it comes to AI and new technologies come up in that German-American exchange?
Well, certainly a lot, and this goes to, you know, understanding what AI is and what it could be best used for. I think that was really where we got a great display of the technology in Germany of how they are using it in the classroom, which was, in many ways, areas that I don't think we were using it. So I really had a great time understanding and seeing how those universities and the schools were using AI, even down to the iPads.
Great. Well, thank you. So Nina and Franziska, it would be wonderful to hear from you sort of what some of the topics are that you've heard so far that maybe resonate with you in terms of what's going on in Hessen and North Rhine-Westphalia, respectively. But Nina, how did you get into this topic in this field?
Well, in Hessen, we now have since 6 years this committee on digitalization and data protection. It was founded along with the own ministry on digitalization in our state. And this ministry has a say on the digitalization budgets of all other ministries. So for everyone who's working with the governments here, you know what that means. When one ministry is having a say in all the budgets on digitalization in all other ministries all over the government. So we have a very broad focus on our committee, from interior, schools, universities, but also economy. So we tackle all the issues. And yeah, I picked the topic artificial intelligence as one which is a key in digitalization and is also influencing all the different fields. And is especially important right now in Germany, as it is in all Europe, because we have the AI Act, the European AI Act. So we now have a legislation framework. Mm-hmm. Until now, whenever we wanted to do something with the data or AI in a specific field, we needed to create legislation, to create regulation around this specific topic. And this time is gone now. We now have a framework, and we have to put this framework, we have to translate it to a state and a community level. Mm-hmm. So that is what we are currently doing on a national level, but also on the state level. We are discussing how do we translate this AI Act, European AI Act, because this will completely change the way how administration, but also economy uses AI. Mm-hmm. So this is one big topic right now. And I'm also on the committee on research. And there I have, many connections with the AI topic. And in Hessen, we have one large research project called Hesse AI. And there we currently also have topics which are very interesting with the US, because you right now have these large investments announced by Trump with the Stargate. And for us, this is putting up completely new questions on research funding, because this puts a lot of pressure on us, which is a good thing in this case, because we need more money in research. But for us, it's also important to have European answers. When I go to the field of education, for example, when LLMs, large language models, are used in school, of course, they are used in German. So we have to adapt them also. So what is our research projects are doing, for example? For example, they adapt language models for school students. So what they are searching is not putting any harm on them, or the pictures that they're generating don't include any nudity or violence. So this is something that needs to be done in Europe. And to be able to do this in Germany, we have to be cutting edge, because if you don't understand the technology anymore, if the US is too far ahead and we look at the algorithm and have no idea what is going on, we are not able to use this in education, in administration, because what is not possible for us is just adopting what is coming from the US, because we have our own regulations. Is a language question, it's a value question, and this means, for me especially, investment in research, because otherwise we have no chance in keeping up with the speed US and China are going.
So since you said the word investment, and since you talked about some of the challenges, I mean, of course, in the news, it's been publicized that the incoming government is going to be making a huge investment in defense and infrastructure. And so to what degree is the digital infrastructure included in these plans? Because that, could be a very important path forward as well.
It's included, especially in the defense area. So all the cybersecurity is now part of this investments, and I think it's key, especially if you look to Russia and how Russia is already influencing with AI, with the large data, our democracies. So defending democracy also is in cyber, and so it's very important that this budget is now also targeting this area. But just for comparison, is the same amount we are now putting in infrastructure, streets, trains, defense, military, schools, that US is solely putting in Stargate.
Yeah.
So these are other dimensions we are looking at when we talk about money.
So Valerie, I see your hand up, but let me bring Franziska in and then we'll come straight back to you. Franziska, Nina was just talking about the EU's new AI Act, and I think it's interesting to note that you're the chairwoman of a new commission in North Rhine-Westphalia to deal with artificial intelligence. Outside observers have often said that there's a bit of a disconnect between what the regulators at the EU level are doing and what companies in the private sector are doing. How is that for you at the state level, sort of navigating between the EU regulations, national guidelines and regulations, but then what you're trying to do at the state level in North Rhine-Westphalia as well?
Thank you so much for bringing me in, Steve, and thank you so much for having me here in this really exciting conversation. So yes, thank you for mentioning the new commission that we founded. So what we want to do in this commission is to take a look in all this, weird different levels. You mentioned it. We have the federal level, the European Union, our state level, and also the municipal level. And we want to take a look on what the state can do on artificial intelligence in their responsibility, so that no one can point fingers at some other parliaments or other administrations. But we really have to focus on what we can do now, and everyone has to work on an AI strategy that will help us bring the state forward and make it easier for our citizens. So this is the goal of our commission. And we take a look on the very different entities that also Lashrecse mentioned. So this is what we're doing as well. So for example, innovation, economic growth, efficiency in governance is a huge issue, because I feel that Germany is the world capital of red tape, and we have to work on that. Of course, we also have to look at education. This is also one of my topics that are near to my heart, but also to civil rights, security issues, the judicial system, for example, that was mentioned before as well, and AI in everyday life. So this is really, what I'm focusing on. How can we set the right strategy so that AI will help every single one of us and make our lives easier? And if you take a look now at the regulation and the European AI Act, that makes me really worry if we can achieve these goals, because in my feeling, the regulation is so strict. It's regulation first, and it's like a risk-averse approach that the European Union is taking there. Of course, ethics, transparency, consumer protection are really important, and we really have to take a look at that, which we will also do on our commission. But we must not forget that a regulation that is too strong will have huge impacts on how innovation and how our country could strive. And so we somehow have to balance these things out. And this is really like a big task, especially, you know, when you can do not so much about it, what now has been decided on the European level. So what we really fear is that we lose track and that we could lose our competitiveness in comparison to you guys in the US, but also to China. So this is a really, really difficult task to balance that out.
But let me push you on that just a little bit, and I'm sure
Yes.
that this is others, you know, a question that others would want to weigh on too. And I promise Valerie will come to you in just a moment. But Franziska, the question that I have for you is because of that, in the state of NRW, because of the regulations and guidelines at the European level, at the national level, what role can state governments play in ensuring the responsible development and use of AI technologies, especially given that you were talking about wanting to focus on AI in everyday life? Part of that ties in, sure, with government efficiency, but it just ties in with how citizens use AI on a daily basis.
So there are some areas where the state level is responsible and can make their very own legislation that will have a huge impact on the everyday lives of our citizens. So, for example, one of the biggest topics is education. So we have the whole budget sovereignty on education. So we can now take decisions, for example, to bring AI into every classroom. To support teachers in using AI in their everyday life and to get rid of bureaucracy, statistics, for example, or I don't know, collecting money for their class trips, et cetera, et cetera. Teachers will tell you a lot about the red tape that they will have to deal with every day. So this is something that we could, you know, bring on legislation about tomorrow. So this is also what we are fighting about on individual education chances, for example. So this is the one big part, really big part. It's also about 25% of our whole state budget goes into education in schools. And the other one is, for example, police and the judiciary system. And there are also so many opportunities that we could take to make the state legislation better, to make it easier for their everyday lives. So, for example, in the judiciary system, we have a huge pile of unsolved cases, of unsolved trials in North Rhine-Westphalia. Around, I think it was 200,000 open cases, because we have a lack of workforce, lack of
skilled labor.
Exactly. So if AI could help to bring the pile down, that would be a huge help, not only for the citizens, but also give the citizens a feeling back of a state that is in control and that serves the citizens themselves. So I think this is also really important when it comes to taking a look at our democracies, who are also endangered at the moment.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Valerie, you've been super patient. I know that you wanted to weigh in on this. Thank you.
Oh, no, I appreciate it. I mean, I think that Franziska had covered some of that, and so did Nina. But just to reiterate, I think it was Senator Aird made the comment about, you know, we in the state level, we're a little nervous about making regulation or laws because there are certain things being made on a federal level. And we certainly wouldn't want to have 50 states having 50 different rules. That's our challenge, but it goes back to my original statement of we have to define what AI is. And I truly believe that we don't need legislation to enable government to use AI to help make people's lives better. And that's why I mentioned, like, you know, Department of Labor. They're doing it for, you know, interviews with, you know, finding the right candidates when they get all these resumes coming in. That's AI. Like I said, Department of Transportation. So in government, we don't need legislation for them to actually do it. What I look at it is that we have to determine, are we making decisions based on the fear of technology to protect us, or are we doing it to take advantage of opportunities? And that's where I see these two different camps, the fear mongers and then the opportunists. But here's the thing. None of this is going to matter if we don't have the energy and the fuel and the, to fuel these data centers. We in Pennsylvania are very, very fortunate because we have a lot of natural gas. So that's very, very helpful. And so you're seeing, I think Pennsylvania really should be the center for these big data centers that will be able to do this data processing. We see them in California, New York, et cetera. So none of this is going to matter if we don't have the energy to fuel all of this.
So I have a viewer question that sort of ties in with that. I did want to bring Lashrecse back in because of your comment very early on about the comprehensive policy. But before we go there, Valerie, since you brought up this energy issue, one of our viewers is curious what sort of lessons or innovations states in Germany and the United States can learn from each other when it comes to sustainable energy management of data centers, particularly in light of what you talk about here, namely the very high demand for energy in order to power AI. Any thoughts on that?
Oh, do you want me to answer that, or does anyone else answer that? I mean, the demand, the base load for just a data center is unbelievable, and the reality is that you will never be able to fuel this on wind and solar. I mean, we're starting to see right here in Pennsylvania, Google purchased 3 Mile Island, which is a retired nuclear facility. That's a reality. I think we're going to have to look at nuclear energy as well as gas, and I know that doesn't sit well with environmentalists, but that's something that we're going to have to grapple with if we want to be advanced in AI.
And the only thing I'll add, because Virginia has more data centers than anyone else in the country right now, and we do have also the Virginia Clean Economy Act, which does have really aggressive environmental goals and metrics that we are holding ourselves to, is that's the $1 million question. We just had our legislative research arm conduct a study regarding the number of data centers that are present in Virginia and how we have to go about providing the energy for those data centers. And there has not been one clear solution. There has to be a diverse energy approach because with the laws that we have in place, we do want to continue to make progress in that way, but we can't have it both ways. And so we have to be practical about what that looks like. And I think that question has translated to cost. So then who's going to pay for it? Does the ratepayer pay for having to provide this, or does the entities that are sourcing it and needing it? And so it is a conversation that is actively happening right now. And so to say that there is a clear answer, I just don't know that one exists just yet.
I mean, I think it's something that we're going to be working on as we're moving forward, right? But it's obvious that the energy question is going to be one that occupies us for years to come.
May I give a German perspective on that?
Nina,
I think it's very different from US. In Frankfurt, in Hessen, we have a main hub also for data centers, because it's where the transatlantic cable goes. Also we have many data centers here. And what we are now doing is we are mainly advising cities and communities, because they can make regulations, and they are actually doing that. So they say, okay, if you want to build a data center here, it has to meet this efficiency standards. And because it's best to build them here. You can make so much money with data centers. They meet the efficiency needs. And also we are advising these cities on how they can use the heat, because you can save a lot of energy if you use the heat to heat your houses. If you use that, you get on a positive side regarding energy costs. And but these networks have to be built to bring the heat to the houses from the data centers. So even cities are now working on regulations to make the companies also pay for that. And they do, because there is so much money in this field. And yeah, so now we are currently working on that. So the state is funding a very small office. 4 people is not like a large budget, who just help the cities deal with these regulations. And it has a large impact on the communities, because already the data centers in our region are more need of energy than the rest of the economy and the private housing. So is a key to be first and not wait until the centers are built.
Franziska, do you want to weigh in on the energy question as well?
Yeah, just a small addition to that. We have quite different situations if you look to different states. So for example, my home state, North Rhine-Westphalia, has a lot of really heavy industry as well. So we are still producing steel, aluminum as well. So we are, since so many years, already dealing with energy issues on how to get it there, on how to implement renewable energies that could serve industry and heavy industry. And at the same time, to have affordable energy prices for the citizens as well. So this is a huge deal. And AI doesn't make it easier as well. We also want to attract big data centers, and we will get one as well in the south of my state, which I'm really happy about. But especially if you look at how the DeepSeek issue or the uprising of DeepSeek and their energy approach shackled the whole world, like shook it all up. I think this will still be an ongoing discussion, and energy will be one of the most important issues to deal with if you look at the development of AI. So we will also deal with that on the Commission.
So, shifting gears a little bit, a couple of people have submitted questions that look at sort of the weaponization of AI and what your concerns at the state level might be that external actors could weaponize AI, whether it's Russia, China. Somebody even suggested that under President Trump, AI can be weaponized. What are your concerns in each of your states about this happening? And are there things that you can do at the state level to try to, I guess, increase awareness among your citizens about the risks that are posed? Both Nina and Franziska were nodding first. Do the two of you want to sort of take a stab at that?
Yeah, I can start. So as you read in my bio, I did a master's in communication last year, and my thesis was about deepfakes in political communication. So what you described, Steve, is already happening. Artificial intelligence is used as a weapon when it comes to artificial videos and images, trying to manipulate public opinion on the one hand. But it's also a big threat, the whole part of dark AI, which is attacking our companies, our infrastructure as well. So there are huge threats that we, of course, have to deal with. Starting with disinformation. As a school politician, I will always say that we will have to educate, especially our children, but also the adults, on how they can deal with disinformation, how they can look at their sources, how they can get serious and responsible sources to take a look at, so that they can make the right decisions for them, also like political decisions. Also, the second threat, if you look at infrastructure and our companies and their vulnerability, we also put a lot of budget into research on this, on cybersecurity, for example. So near my hometown, which is in the very south of the state, in Bonn, we built a cybersecurity cluster with universities, but also with companies and also regulators. So they work together on tackling these issues. And it's really important to take a look at that. Otherwise, our our industries, and also our societies will get really, really vulnerable.
I can just stress what Franziska just said. And I want to emphasize on your last part because I'm, as I said, also responsible for research, and research in universities also is a state competence in Germany. So it's not dealt with at the national level, but it's our responsibility as states to fund research at universities. And if we are not at the forefront, if we are not cutting edge, we have no chance in dealing with these threats. And the knowledge comes from the universities. So directing money to research in this area, I think, is key. Also providing the infrastructure, the computing infrastructure for our universities. And this is something, when you look to Europe, when you look to Germany, just very few universities right now have a really high-performing computing infrastructure. When you compare it to non-European, or even outside Germany, France is ahead of us, UK is ahead of us, Switzerland is ahead of us. So providing the infrastructure, investing in this is key. Otherwise, we have no chance because we don't have the knowledge. And if you don't understand the technology, how should we compete? How should we educate? How should we get the people in our military, our cybersecurity experts? And this for me is very much the key in tackling also the security threats. And they are there, especially the attack on democracy is what I see as a key factor nowadays.
So we have, I think, a really fascinating question from Michael Nelson from the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace in Washington, D.C. And Michael, I'm going to unmute you so that you can pose your question yourself. And I think it goes directly to Valerie and something that she was saying before, but I'm sure that others would like to comment. Michael, your mic should be functioning.
Thank you very much, and thanks for a delightful and deep conversation. At Carnegie, we're focused on international affairs, but we've got a whole effort on subnational relations, particularly at Carnegie, California. My question is about the definition of artificial intelligence. And it was mentioned that we really don't have a working definition, and either to define what is AI or what isn't AI. And I was going to ask the four of you, in your discussions with other legislators, is there an understanding that in just a few years, almost every piece of software, almost every sophisticated chip is going to be incorporating some subroutine that does some AI? So we're not writing AI regulation, we're writing regulation for all of computing. Is that understood? And is that what we really want to do? And why?
So Lashrecse, your hand went up first. So why don't you respond first?
I want to jump in here because it's been something that's been weighing on my mind throughout this conversation. One thing that I will commend the EU AI Act on is that they have taken a risk approach to their regulation, which I think is critical for any regulation that is being developed at the state level. To your point, there is no clear one-size-fits-all definition for artificial intelligence, and there certainly is an evolving list in terms of the ways that artificial intelligence, regardless of the category you want to break it into, how it's being incorporated into minimal to expansive types of tools, which is why the risk categorization is so critical. You cannot regulate the use of technology down to it appearing in your cell phone or it being in your spam filter or your email, all of these different things. But what you can regulate is the level of decision that a tool is making, and you can regulate the risk that is imposed to an entity by that tool. And I think as a framework, what I am seeing when I look at in the US, Colorado's legislation, New York's legislation, I want to say Utah, what we're doing here in Virginia, California, and a number of others, is trying to maybe look at this risk approach. Because if you try to take a approach where you're trying to define AI in one way and forcing everyone to adhere to that one or identify that same one definition, it quickly becomes outdated. And if you look at what NIST had and what their evolution has been over a period of time, you'll see that even NIST has said it's too fast moving. It keeps changing. It keeps evolving. But when you focus in on what is the impact of this technology and you use that type of categorization, you come to a much closer ability to not only target your regulation so that it does not stymie innovation, but there is a broad application, understanding, and use by government, by business, by all the entities that want to figure out how to adhere to any regulation that's coming on board. And that is so critical because, to the point I made earlier about not having a patchwork of different types of policies and regulations, what we have to do if we are going to charge state governments with being the sort of regulatory entity, if you will, because we don't have a national framework here in the US, is we've got to get as close to an understanding as possible. And I'll just give you an example. In Virginia, in our most recent legislation, we spell it out in the code. Here's what we're not applying this legislation to. And we do that by talking about the high risk categories in the other categories where to make it clear that this doesn't apply to you. So I just wanted to start the conversation there and say that.
Very glad to hear you focusing on use and also on how things are evolving. And also very glad to see Ms. Eisenhardt nodding her head in agreement.
Yeah.
Well,
because
interestingly enough, there was another question that was submitted that ties in here too, that basically gets at the essence of whether one shouldn't cast a wider net and not just focus on AI, whether legislation shouldn't look at quantum technology altogether and the myriad impact on energy consumption, science, learning, but also efficiencies, with AI just being one piece of that. But Nina, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I think that you were gonna weigh in as well.
Yeah, but just very shortly, I nodded my head so much because what you said about is exactly what we have in the AI Act, and you said it yourself. It is a very broad definition of AI, also acknowledging that the technology changes over time, not making the mistake because EU legislation takes years to set a tight definition. And then seeing what kind of data is processed? For what is it used? Does the government use it for repression, or is it for selecting people? And then is what we talked about in the beginning? Might there be biases? And this is the focus. And yes, then it's way broader, and the AI Act also acknowledged that. And I think it's the right approach, because you have to look at the area and where data is used and where this technology is used, and not at the algorithm itself.
Any other comments from the two of you who have not yet spoken? Valerie and Franziska.
Maybe only a short addition, because I want to stress something that Lashrecse said I feel liberal approach to digital rights. I find this hugely important to state that data sovereignty belongs to the individual, not the state, that AI must be transparent, respect privacy rights, that and I think you said it like that AI should empower and not control. So, for example, we're always discussing mass surveillance and censorship. And I think that this is one of the really good things about the AI Act in Europe, is that we have a chance to have an AI that is ethical in a way that it remains neutral, free from ideological bias, and promoting this diversity of thought and innovation that maybe is a bit more under stress on your side of the Atlantic, if I see it correctly. So this is one of the advantages that we put a focus on that. But of course, we always have to work on, not putting innovation at risk at the same time. So what I feel is when it comes to the comparison of the US, China, and Europe is that we somehow have to find a middle way. And this is what we're working on.
So that's a great segue to Valerie. We're going to be posting something in the chat for people to look at as well, a diagram that helps define and understand what AI is. And I think that that's a good tie-in to you as well.
Well, I think as it was brought up, and thank you for posting that. I wasn't able to post that's, but I think, that's like a basic diagram of what exactly it is. And I think that we as regulators and legislators, we have our meetings and we talk about regulating AI or being fearful of it, when I find that people don't even know what it is. And what I talked about in the very beginning is that we have to understand what its purpose is and put it into the different silos. And that really is the very first thing we need to do, is understand what exactly is AI. Now, I come from the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area, and we have Carnegie Mellon University, which is a center for robotics. Robotics is AI, because you need AI to run the robotics. So, a lot of people think those are two different things, but they are one. And so I think that we are still kind of getting into we're in the learning curve here of how can you regulate something if you don't know what it is. And unfortunately, legislators tend to sometimes put the cart before the horse and start regulating things out of fear. And that's one thing that I do not want to see happen, at least in our state, is that let's really be thoughtful about legislation. And I think Senator Aird mentioned that, I think described it very, very well, what is happening in Virginia. We just have to be very conscious of that and understand what it is.
It's actually a perfect segue to one of the questions that one of our viewers asked, which is what's being done at the state and federal levels in both countries to help people understand what AI is and make them more knowledgeable about both the pros and the cons of generative AI. I think it'd be really interesting to hear from your state perspectives what you think is going on nationally in Germany, but in each of your states, and nationally here in the US as well. Nina, you're the first to nod, so let me come to you.
I should control my head. Okay. I have two examples for you in this case. So one thing we do is we have labs for schools, but we have them together with companies, and they learn about AI, but also about other technology. Is it more a technology lab? But AI plays a key role, and the classes can come, they can experiment, and it's also in a close cooperation with companies, because we also want young people to go to this field and to be more interested in also working in this field. So that is not only writing it to the books and making him study AI, what does it mean at school, but making it a fun way. That is one example. And the other, AI literacy, also concerns our companies. So we have, I already mentioned Hessian AI, our big research project in Hessen, combining 13 of our 15 universities in our state with nearly 50 professors researching. They have like a service unit as well, where a company who wants to use AI can come and say, this is the product I want to use. Can you check it? Can you check the quality? So in robotics, for example, can you check also for discrimination factors and so ethical values? And then the researchers support that. And also you can run demos on our university infrastructure as a company. So here we help small and medium companies to also use AI. And I think doing this as a state, this is also mainly state funded, because you have to support students, researchers, but also entrepreneurs to use AI in their specific contexts.
Mm-hmm.
I would only just jump in and say, I think I'm going to be the Debbie Downer here on this question, and that I don't believe that artificial intelligence has become a kitchen table conversation or a kitchen table issue for most individuals. What I have found is that most of the time, individuals begin to even acknowledge our AI or the technology tools that they're using only when they're affected by it, be it negatively or positively. And that often sometimes is a result of a negative experience, which I think feeds the fear mongering that you often hear from individuals and their hesitation to widely want to see the adoption of technological tools, generally speaking, not just AI. And I certainly have not seen, in my opinion, a broad, robust effort to have an education campaign, particularly for adults, around technological tools, and especially artificial intelligence and all this various levels of incorporation. I will say that as it pertains to students that are of school age, having two of my own, I can say I do see an effort to teach students about responsible use of tools, teaching students about the different types of technological tools that they are interacting with, and helping them to understand how some of that is artificial intelligence, how coding goes into some of it, but I don't see an equivalent effort occurring, in my opinion, from what I've seen at the state level here in Virginia or nationally for adults.
Valerie, go ahead.
Yeah, what's interesting is that I also would agree, because it is so integrated with what we do that what we need to do in schools is not teach them about technology. What we need to do is teach children critical thinking, because we can't, because AI is going to replace so many jobs, and that's not a negative thing, because it's going to enable people then to be on the other side of operating the AI. And so, but what that's going to require is teaching our children critical thinking, not memorizing things, not facts, not information, because that information is going to be retrievable. And we're already seeing that. And I just this morning I just came off of a tour of Iron Mountain, where all of our data is stored, and they were putting in they're entering data and digitizing data. I could definitely say that. They're digitizing data, but they're also keeping the records. But what's going to happen is that all of that stuff that people manually were looking for is going to be at our fingertips. And so therefore you have to teach critical thinking. And that's something that we really need to impress upon, teaching people how to think, not memorize, because AI will replace the other stuff.
So as we rapidly run out of time here, let me pick up on those thoughts that you just mentioned, Valerie, and sort of the displacement that we're seeing. I think earlier in our conversation, Franziska had talked a little bit about skilled labor, some of the shortages that we were seeing there. And I had hoped to get a little bit more into the economic dimension of what's going on in this conversation. We haven't been able to do that today, but one of our viewers submitted a question that I think is a great question for us to sort of end on. The question has to do with how AI and particularly generative AI is already resulting in the dislocation of labor, particularly at the junior white collar level. The viewer writes, it's reduced the demand for computer science and data analytics undergraduates from universities to a point where many new graduates are struggling to find entry-level jobs in the United States. This trend is expected to accelerate rapidly and expand to other white-collar roles that gain productivity through AI. And so the question is, what is happening or what can be done at the state and local levels to address this dislocation in the short and longer term?
Yeah, I'd like to address that. What's really interesting is that when you look at some of our like our labor unions, that they want to bring AI in. Let's say, if you're pouring concrete on a road, here's a guy his job is to put rebar in the concrete, and he has to physically go and put that in there. Or can he or she turn around and be the operator of the machine, which then picks it up and puts it in the right place? So I don't think, yes, maybe some jobs might be eliminated, but when you ask the guy who has had to get his hands dirty putting it in and getting that rebar and moving it, to say, hey, do you want to do that, or do you want to make the same amount of money, maybe even more, if you're operating the equipment, which then does that, automatically measures it, puts it in, and predicts some things. So it's going to be a replacement, not a displacement, I believe.
Yeah.
I mean, Steve, I have to say this. I feel like there is an elephant in the room. I mean, personally, and I'm gonna just attribute my comments to Lashrecse Aird because these are a bit partisan, so maybe I apologize in advance. But I think the United States right now has got to get its house in order. So we're talking about the jobs, and we're talking about labor, and we're talking about the transition that is occurring. We have thousands of people losing jobs en masse right now in the United States, and not just white collar, I'm not sure how the question was phrased, positions, but across the spectrum. And so what I see happening is I see that there is going to be a realignment of employment, broadly speaking, across our country. And so as it pertains to how generative AI is affecting that, I mean, I think that's small on the totem pole of how the job market and employment is going to be affected, and is actively affecting people. And so as it pertains to recommendations, I have many thoughts about it, but I don't think we can talk about how one segment of employment is being affected by technology when right now you see a realignment in employment and the labor that this country has largely aligned itself with generally under this administration. Sorry.
No, I mean, I think that that's an important point to bring up. And obviously, the kind of labor realignment that we're seeing cuts across sectors, right? But we've heard the two American voices. As we come to a close, Franziska and Nina, we'd love to hear from the two of you about how you see this playing out.
Yeah, we kind of have a different situation over here in Germany. I think the lack of workers in general, and also the lack of skilled workers, is really endangering our wealth and our development, especially our economic development. So what we want to do when it comes to the job change in AI, and this is where I agree with Valerie, it will be a change and not a big job loss machinery. So what we will do is use the chances of AI to keep our country running with lower workforce. So this is the huge chance that we see, and also of more skilled jobs. So this is also what we want to address, is how can we make sure that no matter at which age, everyone can still get a higher education, and how can anyone develop, find new passions, and work on themselves, and then also go for higher wages, for example. So we see this as a chance because of the situation we are currently in. But of course, we have this discussion as well, and it feels like the same discussion as with the invention of the steam engine. People were also fearing for losing their jobs. And it was more like an economic motor, this whole invention. And I hope, as a liberal, I'm always, really positive when it comes to looking at the future. But I think that it will be a huge chance for sustaining our economic wealth.
So Nina, the last word goes to you, and let me just also tell our viewers that you're going to post something in the chat that gets to the answer to at least one of the questions that we were not quite able to answer today, but the floor is yours.
Yeah, I completely agree with Franziska. The situation in Germany is very different, especially when you look to government and administration. 30% of the workforce will drop out in the next 10 years, and we have no one to replace them. So we really need innovation. We need, especially the public sector, to use digitalization, to use AI. Otherwise, we don't keep this country running. It is not possible. And also, you have to see in this competition between Europe, US, China. I hope US and Europe are more have a friendly competition as big democracies compared to Russia and China. But in this competition, when you are in the lead, you also generate jobs in this industry. And I think here it comes, as I'm now having kind of also a final say, this talk also is very important today, and because we as democracies are competing against the not so democratic countries in this regard. So it's very important that we also join our forces, and that helps us generate the jobs here and not in Russia or China. We can learn from each other in this regard, not only when it comes to regulation, but also when it comes to innovation.
Well, those are great final words to this incredibly rich and thoughtful and thought-provoking conversation. I want to thank all four of you for engaging with us. I feel like we covered a lot of ground, and yet we still left a lot of topics untouched. For example, we didn't even get to talk about data protection, which I know is a big issue in Germany, and not as much of one here in the US, but still a critical one to be thinking about. And so I really value what we did talk about today, and want to thank all four of you for that. Stormy, I know that you want to say something to close us out, but before you do, I also just want to thank our viewers for tuning in and for asking some great questions as well, and for keeping us on our toes.
Thank you very much, Steve. That was a fantastic discussion and moderation. And thank you so much to our speakers and also to our teams who put together this event. I think we have a long to-do list, which we now need to tackle, because while we believe in technology and advances, things do usually not happen automatically. And you mentioned I would say a couple of really important issue areas: education and reskilling, lots to do there, sustainability, energy consumption, and the like, lots to do there. And you also touched a little bit on the ethical dimensions of AI, and lots to do there as well. And then there are also so many issues which haven't been covered today, because you can only do so much in 75 minutes. Like data protection and cybersecurity. So I would say we just have to meet again. And I would like to close off by saying this event again underlined for me how very, very useful it is to engage with each other, to talk to each other, to be in dialogue with each other, to learn from each other. And I think since Lashrecse talked about the elephant in the room, we are not in all areas moving closer together across the Atlantic. And that is something we need to acknowledge. So it's our job, Steve's and mine and yours and of our audience, to keep the bridges strong and to fix if there are any cracks. And please join us doing this also in the future, and please join us in the next dialogue.
Thank you. Thank you all.